And I love that idea of thinking, okay, what could make today a better day? Because we can't control everything. We can't control, I don't always know what emails are going to land in my inbox. I don't know exactly how my day is going to pan out. Some stuff I'm in control of, but some stuff I'm not.
So for me, again, the more I learned about flow, the more I realized not that I don't see a place for meditation in its pure sense in my life at some point, but I feel like as long as I'm having flow experiences, that is giving my brain and therefore the rest of me, my body and soul, what it needs. Welcome to Psychology in the Wild, the podcast where we try to make sense of the chaos of everyday life. So Gemma, what has been wild in your life this week?
I think there is only one thing I can say to answer that this week, because I'm coming up to the end of term at school. So what has been wild in my week is preparing for summer holidays. And when I say that specifically, I mean all of the end of year admin in terms of teacher gifts, sending in things to school, that kind of wild stuff.
Yep.
Then we've had transition days at school. So both of my girls have been going into the year above. So checking out like what the classroom's going to be like next year, meeting the teachers, all of that jazz, which I know is logically seems like a very good thing to do, get the kids prepared. But in my house, it doesn't work well, because all it does is, for both children, make them not anxious necessarily, but it gets them thinking about change and what they're leaving behind, being unsure of what they're going to. So we have had sleepless nights based on that, lots of emotion based on that. And then also, to top all of that off, is my mild panic about what I'm going to do for 8 weeks, just to kind of wrap it all up in a nice bow. So that's my wild week. What's been wild your end?
Well, just to give you some reassurance, because here in Ireland, we start our summer holidays earlier than you do in the UK. And I can tell you now that it is just as wild as you're expecting.
Woohoo!
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, and last night, my little boy said to me, "Mom, why do you always have those purple circles under your eyes?" Yeah.
They were like, exactly. I want to ask the same thing.
Well, let's have a discussion about that. Funny you ask that. So yeah, I think that's been what's wild in my week. Sleep, the exact same things, Gemma. And it's funny, I think this is partly why we want to do this podcast, because every time I talk to people, friends, colleagues, obviously ourselves, what you realize is that when you're in the bubble of your own world, you are experiencing all these challenges and difficulties, and and you're aware of the fact that they're everyday challenges, of course, but it's so reassuring to talk to other people and to hear that in their houses they are going through all of those things as well. And so I think that's, even hearing you and describing what you're going through this week, I'm kind of going, oh God, at least I'm not the only one having that. I mean, last night, literally, I was staying up late with one of my little boys, and because he's having the same concerns about it. They've already finished school, but he's worrying about what's going to happen next year and the new teacher, and so trying to prepare him for that. Clearly it's giving me bags under my eyes.
I mean, there's great feedback.
Yeah, exactly. But and it actually, I've been kind of thinking about all of this week, and in terms of why we're doing this podcast and what's actually helpful for us all, because the last few years have been challenging for us all, haven't they? There's been, I don't think I haven't spoken to anyone who kind of just breezed through the COVID-19 crisis. I think in one way, shape or form, there have been challenges for us all. And I think it's important for us to kind of recognize that, but also to make sure that we're all aware of the fact that we're all going through something. It's really important to remember that there's always going to be these everyday challenges. And that's a lot of what I suppose we would both talk about in our work as well, is, actually embrace the fact that, as human beings, there's going to be hard times. There's going to be times where things aren't ideal. There's going to be times where you have big bags under your eyes. And there is going to be times then that are better as well. And I think, what's one of the ways, for me anyway, one of the ways of actually coping with those everyday challenges is to know and to identify with other people and to go through it together. But I was kind of thinking about, what is psychology all about as well, right? So I was like, what really are we here for? And actually, I kind of came to the conclusion that we're here really to help people identify their needs, help people work out what they need as individuals and as human beings, and then also to work out how they navigate those needs amongst their communities, amongst their families, amongst other people who they are encountering. But I think one of the ways, and one of the best ways to identify our needs, to come to the kind of get to the bottom of all of it, is through mindfulness. People kind of get a little bit eye rolly when you start to recommend mindfulness, don't they? It's like, oh, not this again. Don't make me do mindfulness. And over the years, I've had a love-hate relationship with mindfulness. I know we've had this conversation before as well. But I think I've come to a realization that mindfulness can be what you want it to be. So I don't know, what do you think about all of that? I think I've just gone on a bit of a journey of my internal monologue there for a few minutes.
I also have a love-hate relationship with mindfulness. So firstly, I've never met anyone, and it could just be me, but I've never met anyone that has said to me, yes, I've absolutely nailed mindfulness. I'm so great at it. And that's actually quite a recent realization, because like the things that I find hard about both the concept of mindfulness and actually practicing it are, I normally feel like a failure because I feel like I'm not very good at it, and that and that makes me want to give up, because I feel like, oh, I'm so bad at this, I'm not great, and also we've got that added layer as well of, oh my god, I'm a psychologist and I'm recommending this to people and I'm so bad at it.
Exactly.
But actually, I've come to realize that perhaps it's something that most of us at one point or another struggle with, because half the time our heads or our thinking is either in the past, so we might be reflecting on things that have happened, or how we feel about events or things we've experienced, or you might meet up with a group of people you haven't seen in a while, and that might bring up past experiences, good or bad. You might be laughing about some past experiences, or it might make you feel sad about something that's happened with that person or group of people or type of situation in the past. Or, as is often the case as well, probably particularly in our worlds, in that, we're directing our careers and we're trying to figure out what we're doing with our home lives as well. Like a lot of the time, my head's in the future, trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to get done this week? I think about this week. What do I need to prepare to make sure that I can take most of the summer off, which, is a very scary sentence to say out loud. What do I need to get in place to make sure, I'm ready to go again in September? What do I, what clubs? I haven't booked any clubs yet. What clubs do I need to book for these? All of that jazz. My head is quite often in where I'm going, what I need to do. And I think lots of people are in that position as well, that it's actually, I think, and it's getting harder as well. It's harder just to be in the present moment. Yeah. And exactly as you say, if we want to get clear and build this self-awareness around what our needs are, where we are right now, like what's the best thing for us right now, we kind of have to be present, because we have to tune in with what's going on. But equally, I find it really difficult. So I think I'm kind of in two minds whether it's even a natural thing for us to do day to day. And I think it probably was, in terms of how, if you think about evolution, like you need to be aware of what's going on around you for survival. Is there a threat on the horizon? For sure. But I think the world we live in now, we don't always give ourselves a lot of time to think about, how am I feeling? Like, what's my body temperature like? How are my emotions today? How is, I'll be able to give you a story about how my sleep's been impacted over the week, but am I really taking time to think about how that might impact my work or my mood or my interaction with others or my communication or how snappy I am, as I was this morning and had to apologise to the family. In the back of my head, I'm like, but you children keep me up all week.
I know.
So It's a funny concept. And actually, I had a conversation with another psychologist, Dr. Sam Akbar, who wrote the book called Stressilient, which is a great book on resilience, in another podcast. And she said she tried to write a whole book around resilience and not put mindfulness in it. She's like, but it's impossible because the research is there. Like, it's so important
Totally.
for us to be present, to build resilience, to improve well-being, and to some extent probably to improve our performance, I'd say.
Oh my, absolutely. And this is why, this is why I kind of threw that apology in there when I was going through that thought process, because I think people are a bit sick of hearing, mindfulness is the solution. And of course, it's not the absolute solution to everything. But when I think now about, and I suppose maybe the journey that I've gone on with mindfulness is I've let myself off the hook completely when it comes to, the idea of being able to meditate at 5 a.m. in the morning. I know there are people that can do that and enjoy it and get great benefit from it. Right now.
But quick question there. Do you know any of them? Because I don't.
I have met a couple of people who yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I've interrupted that train of thought.
No. And but it is rare, to be fair. It is definitely rare.
It must be.
But my evolution with it has been I think actually when I read that mindfulness was in the 60s, it was better known as just be here now. And for me, I think actually, so mindfulness is slightly, that the term itself has slightly just been overused, probably overcomplicated and oversimplified all at once. It's one of these kind of terms that we're just so sick of hearing. But I think if you hear the words be here now, and actually that's what I do often during the day, because we have so many, as you just said, we have so many inputs all the time, stimulus around us all the time, WhatsApp messages, emails, things we need to remember to do. And each week there are different demands. Like at the moment, it's the end of term stuff for you, but it's also, each week there's other things. Like a few weeks ago, there was different day, sports day, dress up in a silly hat day at school. That's just school. That's even before you even get into work, and then in work, there's all, trying to identify how everybody else is doing. And we'll get into that in a minute as well, because I think that, we have to be careful of, in our own mindful journey, we have to be careful of making sure that we don't forget about other people as well. So we've got so many inputs, so many thoughts all the time. And that surely has become more of an issue over the last 20 years, since we've had smartphones and social media. We know that that's the case. So just reminding yourself, it doesn't have to be a big song and a dance. It literally can just be a minute in your day where you go, okay, what's going on for me right now? And I'm feeling a bit of discomfort. I often kind of talk about, especially when in the context of going through change, it brings up a bit of discomfort for us. So if you're in discomfort in some way, shape or form, where is it coming from? What's it all about? Is it just because you're hungry?
Which is often the case in my end.
Is it because you just need to get out for a walk and experience just your own thoughts in the outdoors? Is it because you're actually, I've just realized, I'm kind of more worried about that conversation I just had on the phone there than I really realized. So it is literally about tuning into what you need and trying to do something about it. And that, to your point, that allows you to manage your performance better. It allows you to manage your well-being better. And, so it doesn't have to be about, putting loads of pressure on yourself to sit there for half an hour and clear your mind. Although obviously we also know, I should say that the evidence does show that if you can manage that and spend like time, really, really like dialing down all of those busy thoughts, then that is also very good for us. But just even if you wanted to do sort of mindfulness for beginners, I would say just find ways to get through the day by checking in with yourself every now and again and working out, okay, what do I need now? And I know it sounds obvious, and that's the other thing I think about psychology. I did a workshop last week and I said, I started the the workshop by saying most concepts in psychology are just common sense, and I don't want to do us a disservice by saying that. We've trained and worked hard to get.
Can you keep that on the down low?
But a lot of it is common sense. However, it may be common sense, but we forget it. This is the point.
Yeah.
We forget it. I forget it. You forget it. I still get myself into an absolute tizzy every single day, despite the fact that I know all the commonsensical things that I should be doing. So,
yeah.
And one of them is definitely just that tuning in to what your body's telling you, making sure that you take action in line with that. And also, something that we will, a theme that we'll continue to raise, I'm sure, through this podcast is, taking line in with what's important to you, making sure that you know your own values and what's important to you. And that just definitely gets you to a point where, and it's all about these micro decisions that we make every single day. We often focus, I think, on the big achievements, the big goals, but actually what we really need to be focusing on is those little moments in the day to day and making sure that we're making the little decisions that will help us in that day to have a better day. So yes, unfortunately, it all comes back to saying that mindfulness is the answer.
It definitely is an answer for sure. And I love that idea of like maybe psychology, or maybe our version of psychology, is helping others and ourselves have a better day. So it's understanding more, I guess. And that could be different for all of us. Sometimes we need to build our self-awareness. We might not know what's going on with ourselves. Sometimes it might be prioritizing rest. Sometimes it might be connecting with people, or like there's so many different versions. These are the things that we talk about, but ultimately it is about having a better day. Sometimes that would be a better performing better, or feeling better, or reducing something that's been really uncomfortable. But it is all about, and I love that idea of thinking, okay, what could make today a better day? Because we can't control everything. We can't control, I don't always know what emails are going to land in my inbox. I don't know exactly how my day is going to pan out. Some stuff I'm in control of, but some stuff I'm not. And I think most people are in that position. But I think, this idea of mindfulness can be really scary and it can be overwhelming. And the other thing as well, which I found really interesting, I didn't really think about much till recently. I had a conversation about this, is mindfulness isn't meditation.
Yeah.
So I think we often fall into this trap as well of thinking we have to meditate. We have to learn how to get all thoughts out of our head, which quite frankly terrifies me.
Me too.
I would love to be able to nail that. I would love to have no thoughts in my head. Even, for 30 seconds I would take, and I'd probably feel like a new human. And that is obviously something that people can work towards. And there are programs you can do that. There are ways that you can do that. And we know there's massive benefits for that as individuals. However, that isn't necessarily mindfulness. Mindfulness is exactly as you say, be here now. It's being present. So it doesn't mean having no thoughts necessarily, or being somewhere really quiet, or being on a retreat where you can't talk for 7 days to another human. There's those things I'm sure are really beneficial for lots of people, but that isn't what we have to do when we talk about mindfulness. It really is just about being present. So you might have thoughts, and you probably will, and I definitely do. But can we make them present? Can we be like, okay, what's going on with my body at the moment? What can I feel? What can I touch? What can I smell? And I think using your senses is a really great way to go with that. Because you have to be present. If you're talking about what you can feel and what you can smell, you have to be in the moment.
Yeah.
But there can also be things, like sometimes I really force myself to be present when I'm reading to the children at bedtime, for example. Don't get me wrong, I don't do this every time. Sometimes I'll read something, and even though I know I'm even doing the voices of characters, or, put a bit of expression in it, I still don't actually always know what's happened in that story. I'll get to the end of the book and be like, oh, I wasn't really paying attention to what that book was about. Sometimes I'll actually force myself to really take the story in. And I think I'm going to ask some questions about this at the end, and even though that's not necessarily being mindful, I'm not checking in with my body, for example, which is probably way more beneficial. It is forcing me to stop thinking about work, or thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner, or what I'm going to pack to go on holiday, or are the kids going to sleep tonight, or did I brush both their teeth, or did they do that with their dad, or did it makes me kind of just think about where I am. And I think that's for people that struggle with this term of mindfulness and
Mm,
how to achieve that nirvana, don't confuse it with meditation, which
mm,
is kind of getting rid of which is definitely getting rid of thoughts
yeah.
from your head and training yourself to not focus on anything else. It's
Mm,
not that. It's
mm,
focusing on the present, and it's a very different thing. And actually, I think it's way more achievable for most of us most days.
definitely. You did a lovely series recently on Instagram about different ways you can be mindful. And I loved a few of the examples that you gave, like being mindful walking. So again, I find that I can definitely get into a near meditative state sometimes when I am walking. Or you gave another lovely example about listening to music, because again, that's really engaging your senses. And it sort of reminded me also of the concept that we both talk about quite a lot as well, of flow in psychology. So this idea that, you know, you can be so engaged in what you're doing that you're gleaning meaning from it, and you're just totally immersed in the task or immersed in whatever you're doing. And flow is often talked about in terms of work, getting into the flow of work and really producing something. Or in creativity, it's talked a lot about as well, because I think, really creative people talk about this idea that they just go into this zone and creative stuff comes out of them. And then, that's, but you can be in flow when you're in a brilliant conversation. You can be in
Mm-hmm.
flow when you're on a lovely walk. You can be in flow, on a hike up a hill. You can you can certainly be in flow listening to brilliant music, or at a concert, or whatever it is. And for me, that, and actually they've done neuroimaging to show that actually when you are in the flow state, the part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with all of that, busy rumination, decision making, that does tone itself down. So for me, again, the more I learned about flow, the more I realized, not that I don't see a place for meditation in its pure sense in my life at some point, but I feel like as long as I'm having flow experiences, that is giving my brain, and therefore the rest of me, my body and soul, what it needs. So yeah, so now I focus very much on trying to check in every couple of hours during the day, especially when I'm, you feel that discomfort, whether, you're in the middle of something really stressful, you can feel it rising, can't you? And then, it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to just, and I think there is a tendency to just plow on.
Mm-hmm.
But, the other day, after having had not such a good night's sleep, I was just flat out tired, one of those days where, and I knew I was trying to push myself to get through some tasks that I really needed to do. So at that moment, I just stopped myself and went, right, come on, stop that now and just tune in. What is it that you need? It just might be a cup of tea,
Mm-hmm.
it might be a cup of tea. It might be that you need to walk around the block. It might be that, you need to pick up the phone and call a friend, or as we sometimes do, leave a voice memo for a friend. And actually, that's something that I find incredibly effective, because I think when we do, and going back to kind of meeting our needs, or understanding our needs, sometimes articulating what's going on for you really helps you get to the nub of that. So I know that you and I do this sometimes. We kind of leave voice notes for one another, just kind of with a bit of a stream of consciousness. And I really highly recommend that, because, especially when it's in a trusted space, because the thing is, you're not going to, what you don't want is to be going on to everyone you meet about, the fact that you're up half the night with the kids. Although sometimes that's totally fine, because especially if you're meeting people at the school gates, they've probably been through the same thing too. But I suppose, but if you've got a trusted space with a couple of good friends, or maybe a colleague, where you can actually, get to the point of tuning into going, oh, I don't feel, I feel a bit distressed about this particular issue. I feel like I could just do with speaking it out. And this is why therapy is helpful. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone can access therapy though. So can can you literally just for 5 minutes just have a bit of a rant down the phone to a friend? And we know, and again, we know from the research that actually getting thoughts like that from your head out into a safe space somewhere takes the emotion away from it, and actually helps you make sense of what you need to do next as well. So
Mm-hmm.
finding, I suppose, a few ways to both tune into what's going on for you, having a safe space to say it out loud, and then moving on and taking action in a way that kind of fits with what you need as a person, what your values are, what's important to you. That's how I certainly know I navigate the wild chaos of everyday life. But I think that there's the sort of the extension of this as well is the other thing that I mentioned at the beginning, which is the fact that we have to be careful that we don't get too obsessed with being in our own thoughts and being in our own bubbles and being in our own minds. Do you think, I'd love to know your view on this, especially in terms of your, your research topics, which is resilience. Do you think that since the pandemic, where we were all sort of literally told to be in our own bubble, do you think that we've had a bit of a shift towards being a bit more individualistic in the way we're thinking, a bit more insular?
Yes, to some extent. I think we have, in that we had to, exactly as you said, we had to go into our own bubbles. We had to, and both physically and probably a little bit mentally as well. A lot of us were in our own heads. We were thinking about the struggles that we were facing, and and change is your topic, change inside out, and how much discomfort that can create for people, and the unknown and the unexpected and uncertainty. But at the same time, there was this big focus on connection as well, because we were so desperate to be connected in one way or another, and to see people. And when you haven't seen people for a long time, whether it be virtually or face to face, there was this idea, and also this idea that we were all in it together as well, particularly at the start, maybe not so much towards the end of the pandemic, but that start of the pandemic, it almost felt like, I wasn't around in World War II, but when you hear stories of that community and camaraderie and looking after each other, it almost felt a bit like that.
Yeah.
That, we were looking after neighbours we didn't know, or we were taking care of people and there was this big thing of, taking care of other people. And in that sense, it wasn't individualistic. We were thinking more, I guess, about community and connection.
True. Yeah.
So I think we've been left in a bit of a weird place post-pandemic, in that, we've never talked about well-being, burnout, resilience as much.
Yeah.
If we think about the pre-pandemic, it was really hard for us to talk about those things. You think about our work, for example. So being organizational psychologists, going into organization, it's really hard for me to talk about those things. It was, well-being was wishy-washy. That was nice to have if you can have it. We're all about productivity over here and performance, but I guess, those little weaklings that need to think about their well-being will just create something not great for them, but we'll say we're doing it. That was kind of, I'm not talking about all organizations here, but that was definitely kind of what I felt like I was up against. And talking about resilience, they were like, oh God, resilience, like how to cope. If you can't cope, get out. Like there was a lot of that, particularly if you think about the types of organizations that would hire someone like us to go in and work with their teams. Whereas that's changed, and it became a priority for people to look after their well-being, to try and prevent burnout. We've never seen burnout cases the extent that we're seeing now. We've never seen that before. It's never been reported before, at least. I don't know if we've never seen it before, but it's never been reported in the way it is now. So I feel like, we're asking people to focus on their well-being now more than ever before. And that isn't just in the workplace. Think about, what we see in the press, what we're surrounded by. People are talking about well-being a lot more. They're talking about what's going on with them a lot more, which is strange because in some ways, because I don't know if we are checking in with ourselves more than we ever have been. I listening to you talking about being really clear on what your needs are and what's going on with you. I've had to really force that over the last few years, because I guess I've always had this mentality of you just kind of keep going and you're just surviving. And I've often felt like a swan, where I look like I'm floating, and I look like things. I'm sure lots of people looking in will be like, oh my God, you're juggling things and work. And because, my work's gone a bit nuts over the last few years, and little kids. And I'm like, yeah, but underneath it, my little legs are paddling so hard. You can't see that. So I feel like, in some respects, we probably are focusing on ourselves a lot more. We're asking people to focus on themselves a lot more. There's a lot more awareness that we've built. around well-being, what we need. But equally, I still have to force myself to take a moment and take a breath. Think about, ridiculous example of snapping this morning and being quite grouchy. It's my last full day of work before summer holidays. And my husband took the kids to school and I actually phoned them on the way to school and I was like, sorry, I was a bit snappy this morning. But everyone was a bit snappy this morning in my house, which also doesn't help.
No.
Everyone's feeding off everyone's energy. Yeah. Who knows where it started is all I'll say. But I'm not sure that was me actually that started. Not that it matters. No judgment. No judgment.
No blame.
We're all in this together. But actually, that's the perfect time to think, okay, why am I feeling like that? I'm feeling like it because I'm a bit overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed about I'm excited. I'm excited for some holidays, but I'm overwhelmed. I know it's going to be, I feel quite a lot of responsibility. We've got quite a lot of time to fill. We're going to have a lot of fun for sure. There's going to be a lot of meltdowns for sure. I know that from everyone, including me probably. But also I kind of want to keep work ticking over, but I don't want too much responsibility. And so there's just a lot, I guess. And that's the perfect moment in a normal everyday life chaos to think, actually, what do I need? And what I did do is I figured out what actually has to be done today, because I often have all these things floating around in my head. So I figured out, okay, what are the important things?
Yeah.
Is there any way I can just have a little bit of joy, which, believe it or not, probably us talking is probably my moment of actually, it's my flow moment. It's my joy moment of the day.
Yeah.
And that will keep me going probably for the rest of the day. And also I did a quick workout as well, which I did not want to do this morning for sure. But I was like, well, actually, that'll get the blood pumping. And so I guess I've totally veered off from your question about, are we more individualistic than we ever have been? And we probably are. And, think about these. I know we talk about social media a lot as well, and how we connect with people. Maybe we're not doing as much face to face, or we don't always have to. And so I think potentially we, but then I guess that comes in line with building awareness about our needs. Maybe it does make us look inwards too much. And I think it's a really interesting point, because we don't want to get to the point where all we're doing is looking inwards as well. No. Because then what happens to the people around us? I guess that's my question. Like, what happens if we do become too focused on our needs?
So I think that's the challenge with it, maybe, or the tension with it, which is, I think we can all benefit from being more aware, self-aware, and checking in with what's going on for us, and being more aware of our needs, and putting boundaries up between work and life, and all of that, certainly. But then we also can really benefit from making sure that we are very aware of other people's needs, and of trying to collaborate and to fit in with what's going on for other people as well. So, but it's a tension, because while you need to do it for yourself, you don't want to go overboard with that, but you also don't want to go overboard with sacrificing your needs to fit in with the rest of your team or the rest of society. And I think, there's a real danger in that. And I think that's one of the things, to be honest, that's one of the things that I think we are having a bit of an awakening of over the past few years. I think we've all had that realization of, hold on a second, we've seen now that there's more than one way to work. It doesn't have to be we all go to an office from 9 to 5 every day, or in some cases a lot longer than that. We can all work in a way that fits for us a bit more. So we can actually get more in tune with what we need as individuals and set our lives up in that way. So that's really, really good. My worry is that in doing that, we are forgetting a little bit about the benefits to us all of collaborating with each other and identifying what other people are going through. And even like what we said at the beginning, the whole point of this podcast in a way is making sure that we all remember that we're all going through all of these everyday challenges, and the benefit of knowing that, the benefit of hearing that, you all had a grouchy morning together this morning. That makes me feel a little bit better, because we've all had a grouchy morning here too, and it's just, that's what we're here to do as human beings. We're here. That's our evolutionary advantage. We're here because we are able to collaborate and act as a community to make all of our lives better. And if we spend too much time being insular and too much time thinking about our needs and too much time trying to, achieve our own goals, then we're missing out on the meaning and the brilliance of working together on things. And and again, I think we've said this before, but that's partly why we're doing this podcast, because both of us work. Just the nature of our work is that we work alone quite a bit, and I do love that. I love, spending a good few hours by myself getting into what I need to do. But I really have been missing working on a team, because, you see things through the lens of the way other people see it, and you learn things and you understand the world in a different way when you spend more time with people. And certainly the organizations that I've worked with over the years, and, I've done a lot of work with culture change, the organizations that are always the most successful are the ones where they manage to nail getting people performing well, of course, but making sure that they are all working together towards a common goal, rather than this idea of individually trying to achieve, individually trying to progress their careers, or even team by team trying to compete with one another. So, and I'm not saying that those things aren't important. Of course, we all need to focus on our careers and, showcase our achievements and all of those good things. But again, it just comes back to that tension of making sure that we are doing both. So don't know if I have the absolute solution to it, but I think it is, like most of the things that we've said after the pandemic, when it comes to getting back into collaborating with each other, seeing each other in the work context, it comes back to just intention and self-awareness, doesn't it? Just intentionally making sure that we are collaborating with people and connecting with people. And one of the ways that I do recommend actually is, checking in with each other. So we talked about checking in our own needs, and checking in to see how we're feeling and what body and mind is telling us, but checking in with each other as well. And it can actually be, it doesn't have to be like a cringy exercise. I know I was talking to a friend about it recently, and they said, "Oh, please don't make me, talk to my colleagues about how I'm feeling," that kind of thing. And that's definitely not what I'm suggesting or advocating. But even just a one word, how you're doing, or what happened to you over the weekend. And it actually brings up, it can give you an insight as to what's going on for somebody else in a way that's sort of safe for the workplace. But it also makes you realize and become more aware of what other people are dealing with. And I think that's really healthy for us all to know. And it affects how you interact with people. So I think, there's definitely, I suppose, just a reminder for us all to make sure that we're checking in with ourselves, but also checking in with each other, really.
I think it's an important reminder. And I like that idea of checking in and asking other people like how things are with them. The thing is, you don't even have to reply with a word. You can use an emoji. Like my most used emoji is the one with the squiggly eyes, like squarely eyes, i.e. maybe that should be our emoji for the podcast. Like literally, I'm like crazy.
They only
most of it is all the things.
They only launched that not so long ago. And I remember when they launched it, I was like, yes, the creators
That's
of emoji
me.
have seen me.
I feel seen. Honestly, that is my most used. I had to text someone for a friend the other day. They had their baby in their arms. She's like, "Can you just send replies to that text to me?" And it was really funny looking at her emojis, like her most used emojis. I was like, "Oh, where are your squarely eyes?" Like that's my number one at the top left hand corner. And I was like, "Oh, the one with the teeth. The teeth."
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That's another one I use all the time.
Keeping on.
But they obviously, just go. She obviously doesn't use that very often either. So that is, I was like, this is really funny. Look at your most used emojis. Quite telling. So I think what we're saying then around this topic of understanding what we need is first layer, maybe understanding what we need. So checking in with ourselves. That could be mindfulness, and that could be things like, and I had to really think through this when I was filming that series of different mindfulness techniques. And my advice here is it can be really simple and find the things that work for you. So exactly as you said, and I knew you'd love that music one.
Loved it.
Because you're quite musical.
Loved it.
It can be things that you already do. So listening to music, literally just focusing on things like the notes of the music or the tone or the words if there are lyrics. The one that got quite a lot of had quite a lot of reactions actually, which I was not expecting, was actually mindful eating. And I think, even though I felt like a bit of a twit filming that, eating and like preparing food. I actually did feel quite silly doing that. But the reason I think people liked it is because we have to eat all the time. We have to eat every day. So we may as well make it mindful. We may as well use it to our advantage and be present. So that's things like focusing on what you can taste and the texture, and just really focusing or thinking about where that food has come from, how it got to your plate, you know, growing on a farm,
I like
going
that.
to a supermarket. But there can be simple things like, you know, I'm sure people would come across things like body scans, for example. So thinking about what you can feel in your feet, then your legs and your stomach, and kind of moving up the body. It could be mindful breathing. It can just be focusing on your breathing for a few seconds.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've had to learn.
Mindful walking. So think about, you know, your feet on the ground. What can you see around you? I do quite a lot of that. I love that, actually. I do quite a lot there's like lots of forests near us. So think about like the colours on the leaves, or you know what the sun's do. Can you see the sun that day, or what animals can you hear, like you know, squirrels and birds and all of that jazz. And also just checking in, like exactly as you said, like how am I feeling right now? Like, why is my mood low, or why do I feel frustrated, or physically, like, am I hungry? Have I got low energy? Like those simple things as well. But then I like this second layer of being mindful of others as well. And I guess, what are our tips around that, like being mindful of others and what's going on with them?
Well, I actually think one of the things is, even though I've said there's a bit of a sort of a bit of a tension with it, in a way, the first one allows you to do the second one better. It's like the oxygen mask analogy, isn't it? Like, if you haven't checked in with yourself and you haven't worked out how you're doing, you're not going to be able to tune into other people's needs, or you're going to be a lot more reactive to their needs than if you are feeling a little bit more calm in your own self, or feeling like you're at least above that state, you know, on Maslow's hierarchy. You know, you are secure, safe, fed, all of the rest of it. Then you're going to be in a calmer state in order to focus in on what other people need, and know that in order to do that, you know, it's literally just a case of asking good questions, active listening, you know, just asking somebody how they are and really listening to what they say. And again, just comes back to the common sense thing. When I say that out loud, it's common sense, but just how often we don't do it.
Oh, yes.
You know?
Myself included in this.
Completely. So I have to remind myself of that all the time as well. And really just, you know, getting to a place where you feel, you know, and it's always going to be give and take. So, you know, a team is a great example of this. It's always going to be give and take. Some weeks you're not going to get what you need and get what you want from whatever the collaboration is happening, and other weeks you will. And it's just really, in the round overall, are you feeling like, you know, you're able to be your authentic self at work, you're able to connect with other people in a way that feels authentic to all of you as well, and you're producing something great together. So yeah, I mean, really, it is just so much about checking in with one another, active listening, finding ways to connect. And it doesn't always have to be in an office, obviously. So, you know, find ways to connect with one another outside, go on a mindful walk together. So I just think even the act of being aware of it, I think is probably the first step.
Yeah, I agree. And even, you know, think about the millions of groups we're probably part of on WhatsApp, including work groups and, you know, school groups and friend groups and whatever. Even just an emoji of the day.
Challenge ourselves to not use the squiggly eye one the whole time.
Oh, okay. Fine. I feel like we might need some more emojis released then to replace my squiggly eyes. I also quite like the melting one as well. The one that's smiling and kind of melting away. That's also one of my favourites.
Yeah.
And sometimes just a big smile. Sometimes I like the big smile as well. And I'm like, oh, the jazz hands. I quite like jazz hands.
Nothing to see.
I'm like, oh, good. Good. Okay, amazing. I feel like we've kind of tackled this and thought about how we can do mindfulness in the crazy, crazy chaos of everyday life and how we can make it something that works for us. And that is the key. It's making it work for us.
Yeah.
And in my biggest piece of advice is don't worry about how other people do mindfulness. Don't worry
100%.
about, is it the right way to do it? Am I doing it correctly? Just worry about making it work for you.
Yeah.
Is probably my biggest piece of advice.
Completely agree with that, because, and I think that's the other reason maybe actually why I, for a long time, inverted commas, failed at mindfulness, is because I spent quite a lot of the early part of my life trying to kind of fit in with what society was expecting of me at each of those moments. And I think it's only now that I've reached this part in my life that I realize, oh, right, okay, well, that is a waste of time. And now I realize, okay, actually the way to live my life is by checking in with myself and working out what it is that I need, what it is that I value, what, you know, how to take action on the basis of that. And that's not to say that I'm, you know, completely counter to obviously we all have to live within society and kind of adopt the general rules. But it's about, especially now because we're so overwhelmed with social media content telling us how things should look and how things should be, and I should look like that, my house should look like that. No, you should look, and your house should look, you know, how you feel is right for you. And again, just making sure that you check in with yourself on that it's a very adaptive way of being. So I completely agree with that. And we could, I think maybe we could even segue on that whole topic to whole nother podcast about, you know, not letting society prescribe how to live your life.
I've got about 15 topics that have popped into my head from our conversation today.
Yeah.
And actually, on that note of Instagram versus reality, I obviously filmed a series on mindfulness and how to be mindful, like different ways to be mindful. And one of my friends, when I posted on Instagram, one of my friends texted me straight after and said, how many times have you sat on a bench and done mindful breathing on your own? And I was like, one when this was filmed. Now, that isn't saying I don't do this. I do mindful breathing at home. I just don't typically sit on a bench on my own in a forest with someone filming it. So what I was saying is I've never done it in that exact scenario before. So I don't sound like a hypocrite. I do practice this stuff. Although I do have to remind myself. But it did make me laugh. And that is the perfect example of what it looks like on Instagram when I'm filming a course to show people what to do versus what my mindfulness looks like in everyday life at home. Yeah. And I think on that note, maybe we should say, stay safe in the wild. Till next time.
Absolutely. Stay safe in the wild. Do it as works for you in whatever chaos you find yourself in.